It is a beautiful morning here in New York City. Joining us now, former Treasury official, Morning Joe economic analyst, Steve Rattner. Steve's got some charts to go to the economy in the 2020 election. And speaking of that, Joe Biden's lead over Bernie Sanders has narrowed just a bit in the latest Quinnipiac University poll. The former vice president, though, still holding a 19-point lead over the Vermont senator. Biden is down 3 points since last month, though, within the margin of error. Sanders is up 5 points. Meanwhile, according to the poll, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio leads in the unfavorability rating. 35% of voters say they have an unfavorable opinion of the New York mayor. 14% in this poll say they like him, Susan. There's another poll that shows 8% favorability rating.
Wait till they get to know him. That number will go down.
Oh, come on. That's just cold. So when you look at these numbers in the poll that we showed previously, not just the favorable, but where everyone stands, Elizabeth Warren seems to be climbing up as well. What do you see?
I see some good news for the folks lower down the ladder, about 5th to 10th place, because Mayor Pete Buttigieg is actually took a big hit in that poll. So they're probably saying maybe his star is fading just a little bit, and there's room for them to grow.
Mike, what do you see, man?
I see us doing a story a year from now, pointing out this poll and say, wow, can you believe how things have changed?
Right.
Yeah. So let's look at these charts that you've got, Steve, talking about the economy and how Donald Trump can capitalize on it in 2020.
Yeah, so look, the economy is obviously near or at the top of everybody's list of what matters in an election. And not surprisingly, economists have tried to study the relationship between the economy and the outcome of political elections. There's a guy up at Yale, Ray Fair, who has the best model. And so let me show you a couple of historical examples to set the stage for where Donald Trump is. So if you go back to 2008, you can see that Mr. Fair's model predicted 53.1% for President Obama, and it actually ended up at 53.7%. So that's pretty darn close. If you look at 2012, you see he predicted 51.8%, and it came out at 52.0%. Also pretty darn close. I should say that in addition to things like economic growth and inflation, a really key ingredient in this model is incumbency. If a party's been in power for 8 years, really tough to stay in power. If a party's been, if you're running against somebody who's been in 8 years, a lot easier for you. So that factors in Trump's favor as well. So let's take a look now at the 2016 election and what actually happened, what was predicted for Donald Trump. So it was predicted for Donald Trump, and this is the popular vote, was that he would get 54.1% because of the fact that we had had an 8-year Democratic president and because the economy still wasn't doing that great, and that he would get 48.8%. And if you look at the next chart, you can see what actually happened, which is that Mr. Trump was estimated at this 51.6. I'm sorry, this is for 2020.
Looking ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking ahead. I apologize. So for 2020, he's looking at 56.1%. But then you contrast that with these polls, which show Joe Biden at 48.7, and you show Trump at 40.6. And so what you come away with is this disconnect between how Trump should be doing based on the economy and based on the fact that he is an incumbent, and almost every incumbent gets reelected, versus the fact that he's polling so badly. And this is the yin and the yang between his personality, his personal qualities, all the rest of it, and an economy that should be leading him to something like a 54% popular vote share.
But in a conventional presidency, if a president had this economy right now with these unemployment numbers and wages rising, if moderately, he should be doing better than he's doing right now, you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think you'd find that every president who is, or candidate who has run against these kinds of results from this model, whether it be the strong economy and the fact that he is an incumbent. 4 years ago, he was an insurgent, which actually helped him then. Every piece of economic data, as well as the incumbency factor, suggests Donald Trump should win this election. And in fact, if you looked at it today, he should win with something like 56% of the popular vote.
So to simplify the numbers, the charts, you've got the real economy.
I made them as simple as I could.
Color-coded and everything.
You've got the real economy out there, and then you have the real Donald Trump out there, who is literally talking himself out of re-election.
That simplified what I tried to say, Mike. Thank you. Seriously, that is exactly the point. Donald Trump, and you can see it every day, right? You've got this reasonably good economy, and Donald Trump is walking around, you know, giving tweets about Adam Schiff and about Sleepy Joe and this and that and the other thing, instead of touting his economic accomplishments. It's the opposite of what any political advisor would tell him to do, right?
Absolutely, and in fact, even like when you look at as the economy was coming back under President Obama, they were very cautious, saying, yes, they're good, but they didn't want to take too much credit because you're always afraid there could be a hiccup along the way. And it seems like the only time Donald Trump talks about the economy is when he's doing something to mess it up, like about tariffs. I mean, he just doesn't use it as a tool in any shape or form. And I would think that there are some things he could say that even he knew at a basic level to kind of present to the public, because he talks about the tax cuts that people didn't feel. But what can people feel from the economy right now?
Well, what they are, look, first of all, there are people being left behind, and you talked about that yesterday in the Trip Gabriel story, and that is something the Democrats should be trying to exploit, that beyond these headline numbers, things aren't that great, but the headline numbers, you know, there's a saying going that it's the 3-3-3 economy, 3% wage growth, 3%-ish wage growth, 3%-ish unemployment, and 3% GDP growth, and those are really pretty strong numbers in the context of what's gone on before, but Trump doesn't seem to be able to capitalize on that. The Democrats should be talking, as you said yesterday, about all the people who are left behind, because below those headline numbers, there are people left behind. But from Trump's point of view, the great advantage is that right now, the newspaper headlines are all saying good economy, good economy, good economy. And for many people, that does resonate.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.